I'm speaking to you today about transformation. This is the mission that Deborah gave me. And at first, when she gave me that, I wasn't quite sure what transformation had to do with music, but I made something up. So here we go. I am a composer. I write with sound. When I compose concert music, such as an orchestral piece, a string quartet, a duo for violin and piano, the music may or may not have a musical agenda, a story, a striking image from the natural world, a frightening or horrific image, a poem, a painting. All of these things have at one time or other inspired music from my pen, as it were. But in the end, music is sound, and it must stand alone as sound. Sometimes when I compose, it is only an abstract musical idea that serves as the source of my inspiration. I think we just heard a lot of Bach. This is music that is pure sound, coming from the heart, but not necessarily from a non-musical idea. I don't need a non-musical idea to write music. Sound is enough. It just depends on the piece. But when I compose opera, for me, there must be a story, and it has to be a story about which I care passionately. Today, I'm going to tell you about The Wooden Sword, a one-act opera on which I am currently working. It's fairly traditional in that it is plot and character-driven. I would like to share with you a little about how the libretto emerged from the original story, one transformation, and then, with the help of soprano Deborah Rocco, who joins me this morning from Lake George Opera, we will sing for you one aria from the opera, and you will see how a moment in the story is transformed into music. In collaboration with my librettist, Stephen Katsakos, we shaped the story into a rough libretto, and when I started writing music, putting words and music into the voices of the characters. Working from story to words to music is sometimes one-directional. In other words, first you write the words and then you write the music. But sometimes it's the other way around. The music comes first and then you add the words. Often it's a combination of the two, a back and forth process. The libretto is only finished when the opera is finished. This allows the characters to take on a life of their own, much like in writing a novel. Tradition has it that the wooden sword dates from 14th century Afghanistan. It's a folk tale. I first found it in a book of Jewish folk tales and subsequently read several more versions, but used primarily two versions as my starting point. In the original story, there are but two characters, a poor man, a simple Jew, whose happiness stems from his trust that God will always provide for him, and a troubled but wealthy and powerful king who disdains this man's faith in God and puts him to the test. Now, I didn't want my story to be about Jews, and I didn't want it to be about God, because I felt that the story has a universal message, and I wanted to divest it of cultural and religious associations, at least as much as possible. So my first mission was to transform this cultural specific tale into a more general one. Now, I'm the kind of person who reads every book or story and wonders, is this an opera? And when I first read The Wooden Sword, I definitely immediately placed it on the very possible list. Then I happened to see a call for proposals for a one-act chamber opera by the Beverly and Raymond Sackler Prize in Opera for 2007. Now, many of you are designers and architects. You know about proposals and winning the prize. So I entered the competition, and The Wooden Sword won the prize, and I found myself with the task of writing the opera to be premiered in 2009 in Connecticut and Moscow in a joint production by the University of Connecticut at Storrs and the Moscow Conservatory. Now, I could tell by the guidelines for the competition that they were looking for an opera with several characters and even a small chorus. And my original story had only two characters, the king and the old Jew. So when I was writing the proposal, even before I had found my librettist, I had to make a preliminary transformation to introduce more characters. So I made the old Jew a young man with a pregnant wife. Her being pregnant increases the stakes. And a not-so-supportive mother-in-law. I set the opera in ancient times in some unspecific country of Western Asia, wanting the exotic color of a land like Afghanistan, but not wanting to be culturally specific. While I knew I might compose some exotic ethnic-like music, I didn't want to even pretend to be literal. I'm writing Western opera, not fake Afghani music. I did, however, get the names of my characters from a list of Afghani names. Zamani, the king, is the baritone. Hazim, the poor young man, is the tenor. Banefsha, his pregnant wife, is the soprano. And Anya, Banefsha's mother, is the mother-in-law, and she's a mezzo-soprano. The king has a guard, who is a bass. Now I had 5 characters. And a small chorus serves as townspeople, guards, water carriers, etc. You'll see as I tell the story. King Zamani, in spite of all his wealth and power, is not happy. In fact, we would say he is neurotic, even paranoid. He's always worrying about something, that his lands will be invaded, that one of his generals will betray him, that illness or disaster will overtake his people. His only entertainment is to disguise himself as a wanderer and sneak out at night and mingle with the populace to see how the common folk live. One night, during a secret outing, he hears happy music coming from a shack. His curiosity is piqued. He approaches and peers in the window, only to see the inside of an impoverished hut with a young man, his wife, and an older woman sitting around the table, singing happily. He knocks and is received warmly as befitting a guest. He is humbly polite in his wanderer disguise, and after an exchange of pleasantries, Zamani, commenting on how little they have, asks the young man, "Why are you so full of joy? Why are you so happy?" Hazim explains that he is a cobbler, and each day he goes out to fix shoes on the street and earns enough to provide for his family. That's all he needs. I trust that all will be well, he exclaims. It is that simple. The king does not understand his thinking, but Hazim assures him, I see a path when I am still. It winds its way around my heart, finds its way into my thoughts, and tells me where I need to go. Because I trust in joy and not in fear, I know a new path will appear. Call it God, call it spirit, call it wisdom, call it truth, call it oneness, call it love. This is Hazim's aria. This is Hazim's mantra, the spiritual foundation by which he lives. He just trusts. For him, it is simple. Well, you can imagine how ridiculous the king finds Hazim. So he decides to amuse himself by putting the cobbler to the test. The next day, Zamani makes a declaration that no man is allowed to cobble on the streets. He must have a shop, and as we know, Hazim is too poor for a shop. When Hazim hears the decree, he's not too upset, even though his mother and wife show concern. He sits calmly for a moment and then sees some water carriers passing by and gets the idea that, well, he too can carry water. The king comes again that night in his usual disguise to see how the cobbler has fared and finds him once again with his family happily singing. As a water carrier, he was able to earn the same as a cobbler. Nothing has changed for Hazim. Zamani leaves Hazim and his family determined to test him more harshly. The next day it is decreed that every person in the kingdom is to carry their own water. No one can be paid to carry someone else's water. Hazim's mother and wife are alarmed, but Hazim gets the idea to become a woodsman, and the same thing happens. He returns home having earned the same as before. When Zamani discovers that Hazim has once again prevailed, he gets angry. Can this poor man be smarter than the great King Zamani? The king thinks of a better test. He declares that all woodsmen are to become palace guards. They are to be issued a uniform and a sword, but they are not to be paid for 60 days. 30 days. This time, Hazim comes home, his shoulders slumped, his spirit defeated. He's got the uniform, he has the sword, but he has no money with which to buy food for his family. His mother-in-law, who plays the role of the doubter in this opera, doesn't miss the opportunity to say, "I told you so," thinking Hazim is nothing but a dreamer for whom eventually no solution will appear. Benefsha, at the moment of her husband's trial, calms and supports him. It is this aria that Miss Rocco will sing for you in a few minutes. And "Go sit down, my husband," she says to him. "Rest and be still. You will think of something. I know that you will." And then she proceeds to sing her principal aria. "Life is always changing. Nothing ever stays the same. Life is always changing. Nothing ever stays the same. Seedlings grow, ice caps melt, snow turns into rain. Trees are felled, feathers plucked, wheat is plowed for grain. But if our love is constant, if our love is true, even when life changes, our love will see us through. Hazim, your love is constant. Hazim, your love is true. Hazim, your heart is filled with courage. Hazim, Hazim, I love you." And as she ends her moment with, "Rest now and be still, you always say the path will appear. Hazim, I trust in you, and I know that it will." For Hazim, this is his darkest moment thus far, but Benefsha's words help him, and guess what? He gets an idea. Next, we see the king spying on the house, which is ablaze with light and singing. The table is set with lots of food and wine and sweets, and the women are even wearing new clothes. Everyone inside is obviously very happy. The king, furious that somehow this man has prevailed, hides his anger and is welcomed once again, only to learn that Hazim sold his sword for enough money to live for 60 days. And has carved a sword out of wood, much like the one he had as a child, and put it in a sheath. A harmless and simple solution, it seems to Hazim. The family beckons to the wanderer to join them in their dance. And for a moment, just a moment, Zamani loses his cynicism and enters into the joyousness surrounding him. But once outside the hut, Zamani reverts. I wonder if it is his faith that makes him so clever, or his cleverness that makes him so faithful. He strengthens his resolve to bring down the cobbler and prove himself smarter. So, we're ready for the final test. The setting is in the palace courtyard, and the king, for the first time so far in the opera, is in his grand kingly attire. There is to be an execution. The prisoner is led out as the guards and townspeople stand by. The king, whom Hazim does not recognize, orders Hazim to cut off this man's head. Hazim begs him to ask another guard, pleading that he has never killed so much as an ant. How could he possibly take the life of a human? The king insists, either cut off his head or it will be your head that will roll. So, in one of those great moments that opera can do so well, time stops for Hazim. He hears his wife's encouraging word. Hazim, you always say a path will appear. Hazim, I trust in you. Hazim, I know that it will. Even his mother-in-law is praying for him. Dear God, help him, his heart is good. While the crowd chants, deliver justice, O great Zamani. In opera, as you know, everyone can sing different words at once. Then the noise from the crowd dies down. Hazim comes out of his haze, and he steps toward the prisoner and begins to proclaim, timidly at first, and then with ever-increasing bravado. Trusty sword, be so true. If this man is guilty, then cut him through. Trusty sword, be so good. If this man is innocent, then turn yourself to wood. And he draws his sword. And as he dramatically draws his sword, everybody says, oh, a miracle, it's a wooden sword. The prisoner is innocent, free the prisoner. Everyone cheers, except for the king. At first, he says nothing. And then, filled with astonishment and utterly charmed by Hazim's cleverness, Zamani starts to laugh. And he laughs, and he can't contain himself. Dismissing the crowd, he summons Hazim. Do you know who I am? he asks. But you are the king, my sovereign, my lord. Yes, the king answers, but I am also the wanderer who visited you each night, the poor man whom you fed at your table. Hazim gets it in an instant. With a slight smile on his face, he kneels grandly before the king. Your Majesty, I am your humble servant. The king pulls him up. Get up, my friend Hazim the Wise. Although you've won, I get the prize. Hazim and his family are invited to live in the palace, where Hazim will serve as advisor and friend. Whether it's his cleverness that makes him faithful or his faithfulness that makes him clever, Zamani wants to know more about Hazim. And now, Miss Rocco and I will present for you the aria Benefsha sings when Hazim, a palace guard, returns home defeated with no money for food. Life is always changing. Nothing ever stays the same.